Hey dear Zane, hey guys. You stand in the dim dawn chill of Rouen, Normandy, in the year 1324, breath fogging as the bells of the cathedral spill their low bronze murmurs across the crooked streets. The air smells of wet hay, wood smoke, and the sour heaviness of last night's spilled ale fermenting in the gutters. Vendors are only just dragging crates into the square, muttering about taxes, weather, or God's latest mood swing. And you, bigger than almost everyone around you, feel every stare as people assess you with the same suspicion they use on mouldy bread or a neighbour's too fat cow. It's the quiet, uncomfortable tension of a world where body size isn't just noticed. It's judged, interpreted, moralised, and you can practically hear the unspoken medieval chorus chanting, "You probably won't survive this." A butcher wipes his hands on a greasy apron, looks you up and down and shakes his head as if calculating how many pigs you must have eaten just to look like this. A pair of monks shuffle past whispering about gluttony, not about you specifically, but let's be honest, the timing feels targeted. Even the early morning geese, waddling with the full confidence of creatures who provide both down and dinner, seem to honk like they're mocking your chances in this century. And because this is why being fat in the Middle Ages totally sucked, here's your little call to action. Settle in, loosen your imaginary wool tunic, because historically accurate comfort doesn't exist. And get ready to hear how every aspect of medieval life, from religion to medicine to the daily act of walking up a staircase built for hobbits, made your body a non-stop battlefield. Before we dive into the absurdity, drop your location and your local time in the comments. Let the world know where you're listening from. Unlike medieval people, you're allowed to travel more than 15 miles from home without divine permission. Now take a long, slow breath. Let the torchlight flicker. Let the gossiping townsfolk fade into background noise. You're in for a ride through a world where surviving with a bigger body is a full-time job and nobody's offering benefits. You start by moving through those narrow, twisting streets. Medieval towns weren't built for comfort. They're basically labyrinths created by people who thought straight lines were suspicious. Every alley squeezes inward like it's personally offended by your hips. Every doorway seems designed for a thin, nimble, malnourished scribe who's been living off barley gruel for 25 years. And when you do squeeze through, everyone looks like they're watching a cart being manoeuvred through a tight gate. Interested, tense, secretly hoping something gets stuck so they can complain about it later. But the architecture isn't the only thing sizing you up. The culture itself has been primed for centuries to read bodies like scripture. And in this era, scripture is the only reading material anyone has. Your size becomes a public document, and people feel fully qualified to analyse you like they're medieval PhD candidates in judgment studies. Religious teaching, for example, has a lot to say. Sin is visible, they believe. Virtue is visible. Your body is a billboard advertising whether you're living correctly. Too thin. Maybe you're holy, or maybe you're diseased. Too fat. Must be spiritual weakness, or lack of restraint, or some unspoken moral flop. You're stuck in a world where faith leaders preach about gluttony while sipping imported wine and enjoying tax exemptions. Honestly, it's giving influencer hypocrisy, but with more incense and fewer skincare routines. Still, these beliefs matter because they shape how people respond to you. When you walk past a bakery, customers side-eye the loaves on the shelf like you're about to inhale them whole. When you stand in line for alms or offerings, someone always mutters about how the needy shouldn't look so well-fed. Never mind that well-fed is relative in an age when half the population lives on porridge and disappointment. And medicine, medieval medicine, is the biggest joke of all. The physicians of the era swear by the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. According to them, your body size reveals the entire cocktail of your interior fluids, and they're convinced yours is basically an overflowing stew pot. Their recommended treatment? Bloodletting, purging, sweating, restricting, and occasionally shouting at your body like it's misbehaving livestock. Don't forget the herbal mixtures, which taste like someone shoved a swamp into a cup and called it therapeutic. If anyone in your life today has ever told you to drink detox tea, congratulations. You've already lived the medieval medical experience, but living in this body isn't just about public judgment, it's physical. Day-to-day survival is labour, and society expects everyone to move as if they're starring in a farm-based action film. You're hauling water, kneading dough, climbing ladders, repairing thatch roofs, pushing carts, or walking miles to reach a market that will sell you food, but also judge you for needing it. Even the simplest task feels like one long workout class taught by someone who despises you. The clothing situation doesn't help. Tailoring is primitive, fabrics are heavy, and the idea of inclusive sizing is centuries from existing. If you're richer, you get more fabric, but more fabric means more weight, and more weight means you sweat like a medieval sauna goat by mid-morning. If you're poorer, you're stuck squeezing into garments meant for a standard body that absolutely nobody actually has, but everyone pretends exists. Either way, the wool scratches, the seams fight you, and the laces dig in like they're trying to remind you of your sins. Then there's food scarcity, a problem that somehow also turns into a reason to blame you. Famine cycles hit regularly, harvests fail, and people starve. So anyone who looks bigger becomes living proof, in their minds, that you've taken more than your share. They don't care that you might have a thyroid condition. They don't even know what a thyroid is. They don't care that you retain water or have a slow metabolism or just naturally hold weight. No, the logic is simple. Food is scarce, therefore you must be hoarding it. And this is a world where accusations escalate quickly, from gossip to religious judgment to legal troubles to, occasionally, vigilante nonsense involving pitchforks. You move through crowds like someone navigating an obstacle course made of elbows, baskets, broom handles, and livestock. No one makes space. No one steps aside. If you bump into someone, it's your fault. If they bump into you, it's also your fault. Medieval people have zero chill about personal space, but infinite energy for complaining about yours, and heaven forbid you sit down. Medieval benches are narrow, uneven, and seem designed by carpenters who never actually sat on their own creations. If you take up too much room, someone always notices, always whispers, always smirks. Even the animals seem to judge. You've never known shame until you've been silently evaluated by a donkey. Step into a church, the pews are worse. Step into a tavern, the stools wobble like they're plotting against you. Step into a cart, the driver mutters about axle stress. Step into a boat, someone grabs extra buckets, just in case. And yet, despite all this, here you are, breathing in the smoke of cooking fires, feeling the cobblestones press through your shoes, hearing the hiss of a housewife scolding her children for lingering too close to your shadow. You're alive in a century that interprets your existence as a moral commentary. Every step you take is resistance, even if you don't mean it to be. A group of teenagers, the universal agents of chaos across all eras, laugh as you pass, nudging each other, making round gestures with their hands because creativity hasn't been invented yet. Someone else mutters about how God tests us in many forms, clearly meaning you are the form. But there's strength here too. You navigate everything they throw at you. You keep moving through a world where every surface is uneven and every opinion is unsolicited. And maybe you smile a little, because if they're going to judge you no matter what, you might as well embrace the stubborn satisfaction of existing loudly in a society that wants you small. And as you continue down that medieval street, bells echoing behind you, smoke drifting in the cold morning light, you realize something important. Surviving here isn't just a struggle, it's an act of defiance. You keep moving through the waking city, but the weight of all those eyes clings to you like damp wool. And as you leave the square behind, the real machinery driving medieval judgment starts to unfold. Not the gossip, not the side eyes, but the so-called science of the age. Humoral medicine, the grand theory that absolutely everyone swears by, waits for you like an overconfident cousin ready to explain your body with the enthusiasm of a man who has never once been correct. According to the physicians, your size is not just your size. No. It is a complete diagnostic billboard announcing to the world that your humours, blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, are out of sync. An imbalance in their eyes is not a small problem. It is practically a moral biography. They peer at you like they're reading a manuscript and mutter about heat, cold, moisture, dryness, and how all of these elements are fighting each other in your organs like drunken knights at a festival. So when you step into the home of a local healer, because someone insisted you get checked, and refusing would cause more gossip than accepting, you're met with shelves of dried plants, bundles of roots, and jars containing substances that absolutely should not be in jars. The healer, who has a beard that could successfully house wildlife, takes one look at you and launches into a lecture about excess phlegm, the medieval catch-all explanation for everything from fatigue to bad vibes. They tell you that your body is too moist, too cold, too heavy, too sluggish. According to them, your entire internal system is the equivalent of a swamp in late summer, but don't worry, they have solutions, dozens of them. And none of them are pleasant. First, they recommend purging. Not metaphorical purging, not emotional purging, literal purging. You're supposed to drink a concoction of herbs, vinegar, and something that tastes suspiciously like regret. The goal is to make your insides revolt so violently that your humours will panic and reorganise themselves into balance. It's essentially medieval reboot culture. If the body misbehaves, force it to crash. Next comes bloodletting. The healer pulls out a small blade and a bowl, and you immediately have questions. Not that your questions matter. According to medieval medical logic, your blood carries heat, and too much heat leads to too much flesh, and too much flesh leads to sin. And sin leads to you being poked with metal until you're cleansed. This is the kind of logic that makes you wonder how anyone survived long enough for the Renaissance to happen. They suggest opening a vein in your forearm. They also suggest leeches, and honestly the leeches feel like the less chaotic option. At least those little creatures know what they're doing. But either way, you're expected to sit quietly while a stranger drains you like you're a wineskin at a feast. And when you hesitate, they give you that look. The universal medieval look of, if you refuse, you're basically choosing death. So you agree, even though every fibre of your being screams no. Then comes the sweating cures. They wrap you in blankets, place heated stones near your feet, and smear pungent ointments on your chest that smell like burning herbs and questionable decision-making. The point is to make you sweat out the excess moisture, because obviously your body being heavy must mean your fluids have unionized and decided to overstay their welcome. Sometimes, to enhance the sweating effect, they put you inside a wooden sweat box, a medieval sauna that nobody asked for. Your head sticks out the top while the rest of you roast like a holiday goose. You drip, choke on steam, and wonder if this is how people in the future will treat wellness trends. Spoiler, yes. And when all of that is done, when you're weak, pale, dehydrated, and smelling like a cauldron, your healer stands back proudly and announces that you look much improved. Meanwhile, you're one fainting spell away from meeting your ancestors. Of course, not everyone can afford a physician or even a healer. Most people rely on village gossip, herbal manuals that read like fan fiction about plants, or advice from the one elderly woman in every town who knows everything except how to mind her business. These community healers carry an arsenal of opinions, most of which involve honey, vinegar, prayers, and occasionally yelling at your body as if it's being intentionally difficult. Some tell you to eat less meat, others tell you to eat more meat. Some say bread is the problem, others insist bread is the cure, and no matter what you do, someone always thinks you're doing the wrong thing. They tell you to walk more, even though you're already walking several miles a day. They tell you to avoid wine, even though half the water in town is questionable. And the contradictions pile up until the whole system feels like a medieval version of modern diet culture, except with fewer books and more threats of damnation. But the real kicker comes from the physicians' notes themselves. Scholars from monasteries to universities write long commentaries about how fatness signals spiritual weakness, mental sluggishness, and a lack of self-control. They claim the body reflects the soul, and a large body must therefore house a soul that indulges too easily. It's incredibly convenient for them. Thin monks writing judgments about other people's bodies while eating meals funded by the community, sitting for hours copying manuscripts and engaging in exactly zero physical labour. And these writings spread. Priests echo them. Town leaders adopt them. Housewives repeat them. Soon, everyone believes they can diagnose your moral character just by looking at you. You become, in their eyes, a case study, a cautionary tale, a living embodiment of what happens when the humours rebel. But ironically, many people who are larger in the Middle Ages aren't indulging at all. They may have underlying conditions, metabolic differences, hormone issues, genetic predispositions, things nobody knows exist. Some are recovering from famine cycles where the body naturally stores everything it can. Some have access to richer foods only occasionally, leading to uneven eating patterns, and some just are bigger, because bodies come in all shapes, even in centuries obsessed with pretending they don't. Yet the medical literature insists it understands you. It insists you're overheated, overfed, overmoist, over everything. They create diagrams showing how fat forms, comparing it to congealed residue in cooking pots. They write treatises about how to melt it, soften it, disperse it. One physician even suggests that fat bodies are like clayey soil, thick, heavy, and slow to respond. And you want to tell him clayey soil is actually great for pottery, thank you very much. But instead, you sit politely while a man in a fur-trimmed robe tells you your body is wrong according to the elements of the universe. It's either that or risk being labelled stubborn, ignorant, or uncooperative, all qualities associated with sin, which leads to more problems than it solves. So you nod. You accept the bitter herbs, the sweat baths, the endless instructions, and afterward, when you stumble out of the healer's house, weak from bloodletting and still smelling faintly like boiled cabbage, the townspeople nod approvingly. Because to them, treatment isn't about your health. It's proof that you're trying to fix yourself, trying to return to the ideal, trying to align with their beliefs. They watch you like you're a renovation project, someone attempting to rebuild a house that, in their eyes, should never have been constructed that way to begin with. And even though the treatments make you feel worse, even though nothing fundamentally changes, even though you're exhausted down to your bones, you keep going. Because surviving medieval medicine while being larger isn't just a challenge, it's a gauntlet. And every time you endure another round of balancing the humours, every time you swallow concoctions that could double as paint stripper, every time you stand still while a healer waves burning herbs around you like they're banishing a demon, you're reminded of the truth they'll never admit. The real imbalance isn't in your body, it's in their understanding of it. You step back into the street, still a little woozy from the healer's attempt to rebalance your humours, but the world doesn't pause to let you recover, not in the Middle Ages. Here, life barrels forward with the subtlety of a charging ox, and the next force shaping your existence waits just around the bend. Religion. Not the gentle, comforting version you might want at the moment, but the medieval flavour, intense, omnipresent, and very enthusiastic about telling you what your body means. The church bells toll again, sending their iron vibrations across the rooftops, reminding every soul that faith isn't just a spiritual practice, it's the governing system, moral compass, entertainment, and social media all in one, and your body, your size, has been drafted into the system whether you like it or not. You walk past a cluster of friars handing out alms to the poor, their robes swaying like monochrome waves. One of them glances at you, pauses, and then launches into a sermon about the dangers of excess. Not directed at you personally, of course. They never say it's personal. They just happen to choose that topic the exact moment you walk by, as if God sent you as a teaching prop. Convenient. Medieval religious thought views the human body as a moral document. Thinness often signals holiness, piety, self-control, fatness. That's where the trouble starts. The church has an entire catalogue of deadly sins, and gluttony is right there near the top, sitting proudly beside its cousins envy and wrath. And because medieval people treat metaphor like literal truth, anyone with a larger body becomes a potential poster child for spiritual weakness. You remember sitting in church last week trying to find space on the narrow wooden pew while the priest delivered a fiery sermon on bodily temptation. He paced in front of the congregation like a man auditioning for Most Dramatic Cleric of the Year, pointing to stained glass windows that showed slender, elegant saints floating effortlessly into heaven. Meanwhile, the only large figures depicted in religious art. Demons, monstrous beasts, or unlucky sinners being punished in hell. Real subtle. In medieval theology, the body is the gateway to sin. Too much comfort. Sin. Too much pleasure. Sin. Too much food. Definitely sin. And even if you're eating the same amount as everyone else, your body becomes the evidence. The crime scene, as it were. So every monk, nun, priest, and wandering preacher feels entirely justified in publicly judging you. After all, in their minds, they're trying to save your soul. You step into a church now just to get out of the cold. The interior greets you with echoes and candle smoke, a smell that's equal parts wax, old stone, and centuries of whispered confessions. But even here, sanctuary feels conditional. The pews are narrow, the benches creak under you, and someone 2 rows ahead glances back when the wood groans at your weight. Their face shifts, pity mixed with disapproval, mixed with the smug satisfaction of someone who thinks righteousness requires a specific waist measurement. And then the priest begins speaking about the virtue of restraint. He describes the holy discipline of fasting, the moral superiority of controlling appetite, the divine beauty of slender saints. People nod solemnly, then look at you out of the corner of their eyes, like the sermon comes with visual aids and you're one of them. It's not just sermons. Religious writings from the time are filled with commentary. Thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and Bernard of Clairvaux wrote entire sections on bodily virtue and self-denial. Chroniclers describe heroic knights as lean and strong, while villains, especially moral ones, are often shown as swollen, bloated, greedy. It's literary bias with real-world consequences. Nuns chastise novices for eating too much bread. Monks berate themselves in diaries for craving cheese. Saints are praised for starving themselves into visions, and the church calls it holiness. You're just trying to survive winter without losing toes to frostbite, and yet your body is interpreted as a spiritual report card. Walk outside the church and the effect continues. Religious festivals revolve around fasting and feasting cycles. Lent, Advent, Ember Days, Rogation Days. It feels like every other week someone is declaring a new period of self-denial, and people watch each other closely during these events. If you don't look like someone who's been dutifully starving for spiritual clarity, eyebrows raise. If you look too well fed, people whisper that you're cheating, sinning, consuming behind closed doors. During public fasts, larger bodies become suspicious bodies. Your pantry might be empty. Your stomach might be growling louder than the church bells, but the world sees flesh and assumes indulgence. They don't consider that genetics exist, or that medical conditions exist, or that your metabolism works differently. They barely understand germs. You think they're ready for endocrine systems? Not a chance. And then there's confession. Imagine kneeling on cold stone, whispering your sins through a carved wooden screen, only for the priest to suggest gently, too gently, that perhaps you struggle with gluttony. It is written on the body, he says, as if your shape is scripture. You want to tell him you already walk miles daily, carry heavy loads, eat only what you can afford, and work harder than he ever has. But you don't. Because in this era, contradicting a priest is like juggling torches, dramatic, dangerous, and rarely successful. Sometimes religious communities take things even further. Stories circulate about hermits who survived on one almond a day, holy women who fasted so zealously they fainted during Mass, monks who claimed visions after starving on purpose. These people become icons, role models, proof that godliness requires denying the body. You're just trying to make it through a week without being publicly lectured by someone who bathes twice a year and believes weather is caused by demons. But despite all this judgment, the church also holds tremendous power to shape social attitudes. When a priest calls fatness a spiritual failing, the entire town listens. When a monk writes that self-control is visible through thinness, people internalize it. When a saint's biography praises her holy wasting of the flesh, people believe suffering makes you pure, and that makes your body, a body simply existing, simply trying to survive, into a target. Yet you continue. You show up to services because you have to. You make offerings when you can. You walk in processions, kneel in prayer, and sing hymns beside people who quietly measure your virtue by your silhouette. You absorb the stares, the whispered judgments, the assumptions. You keep going because you live in a world where religion is woven into daily life like thread in a tapestry. You cannot remove it without tearing everything apart. And maybe, just maybe, there's a quiet resilience forming inside you. A defiant spark. Because even as they label your body sinful, you know the truth they refuse to admit. A person's worth cannot be seen by weight alone. But medieval people don't have time for nuance. They have plagues, taxes, wars, and crop failures. They want simple answers, and your body becomes their uncomplicated explanation for a complicated world. So you walk through the village, bells still ringing in your ears, religious judgment clinging to you like incense smoke. And the next time someone glances your way with that familiar look, the mix of moral superiority and casual cruelty, you just keep your pace steady. Because surviving medieval religious scrutiny in a larger body isn't just difficult, it's practically a spiritual trial of its own. You leave the shadow of the church behind, but its judgments follow you like an overly attached guardian angel with boundary issues. As you wind your way through the bustling streets of town, dodging chickens and children and carts filled with turnips that all smell vaguely like damp earth and disappointment, you wander straight into the next layer of medieval scrutiny, class expectations. And in this world, class is not just a social category, it's practically a diagnostic lens through which everyone evaluates your existence. Your body becomes evidence, and the jury is everyone you meet. People in the Middle Ages don't just look at your size, they interpret it. They see it as a sign of your work ethic, your virtue, your role in the community, your household management skills, and your moral fibre. Honestly, it's exhausting. If your body had a medieval Yelp page, it would be unfairly reviewed by people who've never even met you. You head toward the marketplace, where artisans and merchants set up stalls beneath faded cloth canopies. The morning light spills over baskets of onions, bolts of rough linen, barrels of dried fish, and stacks of pottery whose craftsmanship ranges from beautifully uneven to definitely cursed. Voices rise in a mixture of haggling, gossip, arguments about prices, and the occasional goat screaming for reasons only goats understand. And as you walk, you feel the eyes again. Not the religious judgment of earlier, the slow, moral burning kind, but a sharper, more calculating, appraising gaze. People glance at your size and instantly decide your class standing. If you're heavier and wearing decent clothes, they assume you're wealthy, indulgent, spoiled by privilege. If you're heavier and wearing worn clothes, they assume you're lazy, incompetent, maybe even careless with resources. There's no winning. Medieval society has the flexibility of an iron horseshoe. You pass a baker arranging fresh loaves on a wooden board. He pauses, eyes flicking over your figure, and you can practically hear the gears turning. He probably thinks you're one of those nobles who stroll through the market pretending to understand the common folk. Or maybe he thinks you're someone who eats too much bread, which is ironic because he literally sells bread for a living. But class expectations twist everything. For nobles, being larger can be both a privilege and a curse. Wealthier households have more access to food, especially rich foods like pork, butter, ale, and honey cakes. So a bigger body sometimes signals prosperity, but not too big. That's the catch. You're supposed to look comfortable, not indulgent, prosperous, not unruly. The ideal noble body is soft enough to show you don't do manual labour, but controlled enough to suggest refinement and discipline. If you're too heavy, nobles see you as lacking virtue. If you're too thin, they assume you're sick, cursed, or engaging in suspiciously enthusiastic fasting. Meanwhile, the working classes, farmers, blacksmiths, washerwomen, tanners, view your size differently. To them, your body is a statement about contribution. Are you strong enough? Hardy enough? Tough enough to carry loads, walk long distances, withstand long hours under the sun or by the hearth? If you're larger, you're often accused of not pulling your weight. No pun intended, but medieval people would absolutely have made it one. They watch you struggle with tasks not because you're weak, but because every task is difficult in a world designed for thin, wiry bodies used to constant exertion. Take, for example, the villagers gathering around the well. They haul buckets of water up with rope, hand over hand, each movement fluid and practiced. You approach to fill your jug, and the moment your grip slips or your foot shifts, someone snickers. "Not used to work, are you?" they might mutter. They don't care that you've walked farther that morning than they'll walk all day. They don't care that your joints ache, your muscles strain, your breath fogs the air. All they see is the visible evidence of effort, and they interpret it through class-based assumptions that have nothing to do with your real life. In a wealthy household, servants and family members alike assess your appearance. Your size becomes a sign of how well the household is run. If you're too large, people whisper that the cook is overindulging you or that the steward lacks discipline. If you're a woman of the house, they blame your husband for failing to guide you with enough moral firmness. If you're a man, they suggest you lack the military vigour expected of your rank. It's like living inside a medieval version of a company performance review where your waistline is part of the annual evaluation. At dinner tables, long, rough wooden ones in village inns or polished ones in noble manors, people monitor how much you eat. You become a spectacle every time your hand reaches for bread. If you eat too much, they wonder why. If you eat too little, they whisper it's because you're ashamed. Medieval mealtimes are basically judgment buffets. And you're the main course. Add to that the social pressure of communal living. There's no privacy. Doors are thin, walls are thinner, gossip is oxygen. If you breathe too loudly while climbing stairs, someone notes it. If you sit down with a sigh, someone interprets it. If you ride a horse, someone critiques how much the poor animal has to bear. Medieval people truly have centuries of free time available for observing and commenting on others. The noble courts are even worse. In those polished halls, appearance is everything. There's a constant simmering theatre of self-presentation. People wear fine fabrics that cling too tightly or hang too loosely, always trying to broadcast wealth and restraint at the same time. And you, simply existing in your body, become a disruption in their fragile aesthetic. Ladies whisper behind sleeves about how many courses you must eat at feasts. Courtiers wonder aloud whether you can dance gracefully, or at all. Musicians speed up tempos just to see who stumbles. You do, sometimes. But honestly, so do the thin nobles. The floor is uneven. And let's not forget the town leaders, guild masters, and merchants who believe body size reflects efficiency. If you approach a guild to request apprenticeship or work, many will judge you before you speak. They think your body predicts your work performance. They assume you're clumsy, slow, unskilled. Or worse, they think you'll eat too much at communal meals, costing the guild extra grain. Imagine being denied a career because someone is afraid of your appetite. Very medieval, very absurd. But the class scrutiny doesn't just affect how others treat you. It affects your opportunities. Marriage prospects, social invitations, employment, religious participation. It all gets filtered through the lens of body-based class expectations. People assume they know your habits, your failings, your virtues, your sins. It's like your body is speaking over you, loudly, incorrectly, constantly. A group of women walk past you now, gossiping as they carry baskets of wool to card. You catch fragments, eats like a lord, ought to do more work, God sends warnings in flesh. No husband would want the burden. It doesn't even matter if they're talking about you specifically. The words stick anyway, heavy as winter mud on boots. Yet there's irony here too. Many of these people admire plumpness during good harvest years. They praise round-faced children as healthy, well-fed, thriving. They envy nobles who can afford sweets and butter. They fawn over pregnant women who show quickly. But when it comes to your body, none of that goodwill applies, because medieval class expectations are slippery. They change to fit whatever narrative makes other people feel superior. You reach the outskirts of town, passing into open fields where shepherds lounge with their flocks. Out here, judgment feels quieter, but not absent. One shepherd eyes you from a distance, smirks, and says you must be a noble avoiding chores. Another assumes you're a merchant complaining about taxes. They don't ask who you actually are. They decide who you are, And through all of this, you keep walking. You breathe the cold morning air. You feel the ache in your knees, the burn in your calves, the stiffness that comes from carrying weight through a world with no chairs built for comfort. Yet you persist. Because in the Middle Ages, being larger doesn't just mean facing physical challenges. It means carrying the weight of interpretation everywhere, from the marketplace to the manor, from the church to the fields. Your body becomes a narrative others write for you, line by line, without your consent. And every day you wake up, step into those winding streets, and continue forward anyway. That's its own kind of quiet rebellion. You follow the dirt path that curls out of the fields and loops back toward the village centre, your feet sinking with every step into soft churned mud. The air smells of wet soil, wood smoke drifting from distant hearths, and the faint metallic tang of a forge somewhere ahead. As you walk, the landscape shifts from open fields to a patchwork of cottages, animal pens, and workyards where daily labour grinds on like an unending wheel. And here, right in the heart of medieval life, is where your size becomes not just a detail, not even just a judgment, but a literal obstacle. Because when nearly everything requires intense physical effort, your body becomes a battleground you never volunteered for. Daily labour in the Middle Ages is not a casual activity. It's not get your steps in or drink a latte while answering emails. It's a full-body assault that starts before dawn and ends only when darkness swallows the sky. Sometimes not even then. Everyone works, regardless of class, and every job demands strength, endurance, balance, or sheer grit. It's the kind of society where even resting looks like peeling root vegetables with a knife that could double as a battlefield weapon. And you, carrying extra weight in a world where every physical task is designed for bodies constantly in motion, you feel each demand with a particular intensity. Take walking, for example. Modern walking is leisurely, a stroll, a vibe. Medieval walking is transportation, obligation, survival. You walk miles to fetch water, miles to reach the fields, miles to get to market, miles to attend mass, miles to visit a neighbour, miles to retrieve firewood. The average person here likely clocks thousands of steps before breakfast, except breakfast is usually a thin broth or a crust of bread convincing itself it still counts as food. You, sweating under your layers of wool, get no sympathy. If you breathe hard on a hill, someone inevitably comments. You'd breathe easier if you ate less, a passing tanner says as he shoulders a bundle of hides that smell like fermented nightmares. You'd breathe easier if the entire world stopped judging you, but you keep that to yourself. Then there's lifting. Everything is heavy. Buckets of water feel like carrying a struggling toddler made of stone. Firewood is dense, uneven, and splinters if you look at it wrong. Grain sacks weigh enough to crush a small goat. Even the tools are heavy: iron-tipped ploughs, long-handled hoes, awkward scythes, hammers, shovels. And while everyone struggles with these tasks, you get the added bonus of scrutiny whenever you pause or shift your weight. Villagers watch you like you're a mule. They're considering buying at a fair, eyeing your performance, judging your stamina, whispering about your value as a worker. If you stop to catch your breath, someone mutters about laziness. If you push through and lift something heavy, someone mutters about how you're stronger because you're bigger, and then uses that fact as license to demand even more of you. Either way, your body is an excuse for criticism. You pass a group of washerwomen by the river now, their arms deep in icy water as they scrub clothes against rough boards. They laugh and gossip between strokes, their hands red from the cold. They spot you approaching and immediately begin calculating how quickly you would wash laundry, how long you'd endure bending over, how many garments you'd manage before complaining of a sore back. Never mind that laundry is one of the most grueling tasks imaginable. Never mind that every woman there already goes home aching. The moment you enter the mental equation, the assumptions shift, because your body's allowed no nuance. You step closer to help one of the women haul a soaked blanket from the river, mostly out of etiquette, and the weight of the wool hits like lifting a waterlogged bear. The cold water streams down your arms, making your sleeves cling. The women giggle, not unkindly, but not sympathetically either. "Careful," one says. Don't let the blanket drag you in. She means it as a joke, but in the Middle Ages, jokes are never just jokes. They're tiny judgment-cloaked daggers. You wring the cloth, arms trembling, hands numb. They watch. You finish. They nod, mildly impressed, but the moment you straighten your back and inhale sharply, one of them clicks her tongue. See? Must be exhausting carrying all that weight. You want to tell her that the blanket weighed more than your entire dignity at this point, but you carry on. Next on the medieval to-do list, climbing, ladders everywhere, stairs carved into stone, rungs missing, boards slippery from rain, houses built with doorways too low, attics too cramped, lofts too narrow. When you climb, people watch with that same anticipatory tension of someone waiting for a dramatic fall in a comedic play. If the ladder creaks beneath you, and it will, they always assume the reason is your size, not the fact that the ladder is made of wood older than your great-grandparents. You climb anyway, because someone has to fix the thatch on the roof, someone has to check the rafters, someone has to retrieve stored grain. And as you cling to beams or squeeze through tight spaces, scratchy straw brushing your face, your heart pounding in your ears, you can almost hear the unspoken commentary. If they were thinner, this would be easier, as if medieval life is easy for anyone. Weighted tasks are equally brutal. Grinding grain using a hand mill requires shoulder strength and rhythm. You lean into the effort, pushing the heavy stone in circles while sweat drips down your temples. A neighbour observes from the doorway, arms crossed, offering unsolicited advice. Put your back into it. You're built for this. You resist the urge to throw the grain at him. Carrying a yoke. Torture. The wooden beam digs into your skin. The buckets bounce with every step. Your legs ache. Your arms burn. And every wobble becomes public entertainment. Children follow you, giggling as you sway, because medieval kids are tiny agents of emotional chaos who have not yet discovered empathy. And then there's manual labour tied to seasons. Harvest time, endless bending, cutting, lifting, bundling. Winter, endless chopping, hauling, mending, storing. Spring, endless planting, digging, repairing. Summer, endless sweating, scything, sweating, and wondering when you lost the will to live. Every season demands everything a body can give, and then demands more. In all of this, people expect you to keep up. They assume your size makes you stronger. They assume your endurance should be limitless. Or, if they see you struggle, they interpret it as confirmation of laziness. There's no winning. Your body is either expected to work harder than everyone else, or blamed for failing to meet arbitrary expectations. And the worst part? You can't opt out. Labour is survival. There are no desk jobs, no light duty, no ergonomic chairs or adjustable tools. Medieval life is an endless boot camp run by an instructor who thinks compassion is sinful. If you decline a task because of pain, people assume you're exaggerating. If you say your joints hurt, they blame your weight. If you ask for help, they act as though you asked for a feast. You try to chop firewood next, grasping the axe handle with fingers stiff from the cold. The axe is heavier than it looks, the wood knotty and resistant. You swing, the impact jarring your arms. A second swing, a third. Someone nearby mutters, "If they didn't eat so much, this'd be easier." You look over. You see a man whose own arms shake when he lifts his daughter. But medieval hypocrisy has the survival instincts of a rat. It thrives everywhere. Even resting is suspicious. Lean against a fence post and villagers assume you're avoiding work. Sit on a bench and it creaks. Everything creaks. Medieval carpentry is enthusiastic but not reliable. And people whisper. Take a moment to breathe and someone tells you unironically, if you worked harder, you wouldn't get tired so quickly. As if physics bows to social expectations, still, every day you push through. You tie bundles, carry loads, scrub floors, haul sacks, trudge through mud, and climb rickety ladders that should have been retired decades ago. And despite the exhaustion, despite the way your joints throb and your back protests, there's a strange strength in this survival. Because medieval labour doesn't break only you, it breaks everyone. The difference is that when other people falter, the world sympathises. When you falter, the world critiques. But you keep going. You shoulder the weight. You rise before dawn and keep working until stars prickle the sky. You move through a world that demands more than it gives back, and each time someone underestimates you, each time someone comments on your breath, your posture, your pace, your effort, you continue. Because living in this era with a larger body isn't just about enduring backbreaking work, it's about the quiet power of refusing to disappear in a society that constantly tries to shrink you, both physically and metaphorically. You carry buckets, you chop wood, you climb ladders, you knead dough, you lift grain, you sweat through layers of scratchy wool, you endure, and slowly, the truth emerges. Your struggle isn't proof of weakness, it's proof of resilience. You wipe the sweat from your forehead with a sleeve already stiff from earlier chores, and as you make your way back toward the village lanes, another unavoidable truth of medieval life settles over you. Clothing. Not fashion, not self-expression, not what's my aesthetic today. No, just clothing. The kind that scratches, suffocates, weighs a ton, shrinks when wet, swells when humid, and absolutely refuses to cooperate with a body like yours. If daily labour is the battlefield, then medieval clothing is the armour that actively tries to sabotage you. You step into a weaver's alley now, where dyed wool hangs drying from crooked beams like colourful itchy flags. Scarlet, mustard, indigo, beautiful from a distance, torture up close. Women sit at looms, their hands darting across threads with a speed that would impress even modern textile workers, but the garments they produce have one mission: fit the average medieval body. And the average medieval body is imaginary, entirely theoretical, based on measurements taken from saint statues and wishful thinking. So when you need clothing, you're forced to enter a tiny workshop lit by a single window and a single candle, both of which struggle. A tailor, thin, sharp-nosed and shaped like someone who survives on nerves alone, greets you with the flattest expression imaginable. He glances at your shoulders, your waist, your hips, and you watch his soul leave his body for a moment. Then, with the politeness of a man performing emotional triage, he mutters, we can improvise. Always a promising start. He pulls out measuring cords. Not measuring tapes. Cords. Rough, frayed, more symbolic than accurate. He wraps them around you while making small noises, little clucks of surprise, tiny sighs, muttered prayers for patience. You stand there stiffly, trying not to knock over a basket of tangled thread with your elbow. The tailor steps back, scratching his head. The sleeves will have personality, he says. The seams may be expressive. Which is medieval tailor speak for. This garment is going to fight you like a demon during an exorcism. He gets to work. Wool is his material of choice, because linen is expensive, and silk is for nobles who pretend not to sweat. Wool, thick, scratchy, heavy, warm in winter, unbearable in summer. And for bigger bodies, wool becomes a personal sauna. As he cuts the fabric, you already dread the sensation of it rubbing against your skin, clinging to sweat, trapping heat, smelling faintly of the sheep it came from. When he fits the first layer on you, the fabric pulls across your shoulders like it disapproves of your ribcage. He tugs, he pinches, he slices, he mutters, "Hold still," about 50 times, and no matter how still you stand, he treats your body like a stubborn beast of burden, refusing to cooperate with harness straps. Once he laces the garment at the sides, because medieval tailoring loves laces, strings, cords, knots, anything that digs into flesh, your torso feels compressed. Not shapewear compressed, not cinched, more like a travelling blacksmith sat on you. Your ribs protest, you breathe shallowly. The tailor steps back proudly, completely ignoring the fact that you cannot inhale fully without seeing stars. That, he declares, is a fit. You look like a wrapped ham. Worse still, medieval clothing has layers, undergarments, shifts, tunics, surcoats, overdresses, cloaks, all stacked like you're a cabbage pretending to be human. And because the era believes sweat is unhealthy, you're expected to wear more layers to absorb it, not fewer. The irony could kill you if the humidity doesn't. And then comes the lacing, tight lacing, which squeezes, heavy lacing, which strains, side lacing, which traps, back lacing, which requires assistance, except assistance is rarely offered kindly. When someone helps you tighten a garment, they pull the cords with the enthusiasm of a sailor hoisting anchor. You gasp. They say nearly done. You consider your will. If you're wealthier, you get finer fabrics, but finer doesn't mean lighter. Brocaded wool weighs as much as your chores. Velvet gathers heat like a stove. Silk is cool, yes, but it tears easily, and if you rip it, because of course you will, you'll hear about it for years. If you're poorer, the options worsen. Coarse wool that feels like ground thistles. Reused garments that belong to someone smaller and never forgot it. Patches over patches, seams that trap sweat. Sleeves that fight every movement. You're a walking medieval puppet, tugged by your own clothes, and don't even get started on shoes. Leather stiff as cured bark, soles thin as pancakes. No arch support, no cushioning, just raw pragmatism. And medieval roads aren't flat. They're stones, ridges, ruts, puddles, animal droppings, and the occasional aggressive goose. If you're heavier, every step bites into the joints of your feet and knees harder. People assume it's because of your weight. They don't consider the footwear is basically a suggestion, not a functional object. You trudge down the path, cloak dragging behind like a damp dog, and feel the weight of your clothes with every movement. Sitting is no relief. Benches are narrow, your layers bunch, seams press into your stomach, and everyone notices if you adjust your garments or breathe too deeply. Standing is worse. Cloaks shift and choke, tunics ride up, belts dig into your sternum, laces loosen at the worst moments, usually during church or meals or any time you want the ground to swallow you. Even relieving yourself is a nightmare. Medieval clothing is not designed for bathroom breaks. Layers must be lifted, tucked, shifted, negotiated with. You practically need an assistant or a degree in medieval engineering to use a chamber pot without incident. Meanwhile, thin people boast about effortless movement, as though the clothes themselves appreciate their existence more. And then there are festivals, public gatherings, feasts, market days. Times when appearance matters most and comfort matters least. You walk through a market now, cloaks swirling, the wool scraping your neck like an angry cat. People glance at your outfit, judging how well, or poorly, it fits. A noblewoman passes, her gown gliding in a way yours never will. She eyes you like your seams have personally offended her. Workers glance at you and assume the garment means indulgence. Children whisper that the cords look tight enough to burst. One wrong move, bend too quickly, twist too abruptly, and the seams groan. And medieval seams don't quietly endure stress. They protest, loudly, suddenly, dramatically. The sound is unmistakable. Fabric tearing like betrayal. You freeze. A few heads turn. Someone smirks, someone else snorts. You pull your cloak tighter, cheeks burning, and pretend nothing happened. But in a world with no privacy, rumours travel faster than plagues. By sundown, half the village will know your tunic lost its will to live. You think back to noble courts, places obsessed with appearance. Courtiers parade in garments so tight they can barely sit, corset-like bodices, fitted sleeves, doublets that squeeze torsos like overzealous hugs. If you wore their clothes, you'd suffocate before dessert. And that's assuming the tailor would agree to make them at all, which he probably wouldn't. Nobility hates when bodies deviate from their theatrical proportions. Even sleep doesn't rescue you. Night clothes are thin but stiff. Blankets are heavy. Mattresses, if you can call straw sacks mattresses, sink under you unevenly, forcing your spine into shapes that would horrify a modern chiropractor. You wake stiff, sore, hot, itchy, and wrapped in fabric that is twisted around your limbs like a vengeful spirit. And yet, through all this, you endure. You pull the fabric into place. You braid laces with numb fingers. You patch seams that burst. You adjust belts, smooth layers, and keep walking, even when the weight of the garments feels like carrying another person. Because wearing medieval clothing while navigating medieval expectations isn't just uncomfortable. It's a constant reminder of how this world refuses to make space for bodies like yours. Every garment demands conformity. Every seam carries judgment. Every layer whispers that you should take up less room, move more delicately, breathe more quietly, but you don't. You walk anyway, wool scratching, laces tugging, layers shifting, and every step becomes a small, stubborn declaration. A declaration that your body deserves to exist comfortably, even in a world determined to make sure it doesn't. You trudge back toward the village centre as the sky deepens into the muted gold of late afternoon, and the air grows thick with the smell of simmering stews, roasting onions and bread turning crisp in clay ovens. Normally, this would be comforting, warm, earthy, familiar. But for you, in this body, in this century, food isn't comfort. Food is politics. Food is suspicion. Food is blame. In the Middle Ages, where scarcity is a seasonal event and starvation is a recurring plot twist, every bite you take becomes a public performance, and every pound on your body becomes evidence in the case against you. You pass the baker's stall first. He's pulling rounds of rye bread from the oven, steam rising around him like a holy aura. People crowd around, clutching coins or bartering with baskets of eggs. The moment the baker sees you, his eyebrow lifts. A small gesture, barely noticeable, but sharp enough to slice bread. He watches how long your gaze lingers on the loaves. You can practically hear the silent gasp. Look how hungrily they stare. You step closer to buy one because everyone needs to eat, but the baker hesitates. He weighs the bread in his hands, examines you again, then announces a price slightly higher than what he told the previous customer. Subtle, petty, but common. A larger body means, in his mind, you must desire food more, and desire, in medieval morality, always deserves punishment. Behind you, a woman whispers to her friend, bread is scarce this season. Some people have had more than their share. The friend nods without even looking up. They don't say your name. They don't have to. Food scarcity is the rhythm of medieval life. Some years the harvest is generous. Most years it's mediocre. Some years it fails entirely. Too much rain, too little rain, early frost, locusts, mildew, war, taxes that siphon grain away before winter even arrives. When the harvest falters, entire villages tighten their belts. Rations shrink. Pottage gets thinner. Bread gets darker, made with more barley, millet, oats, whatever filler you can stretch into something edible. And in those moments of communal hunger, people look around for someone to blame, and anybody with a larger body becomes the most convenient target. It doesn't matter that you eat the same amount as everyone else. It doesn't matter that your body might naturally store fat. It doesn't matter that you might be dealing with conditions medieval medicine doesn't understand. In this society, appearances are reality. And the reality they choose to believe is that your size means greed. You walk past a group of men repairing a thatch roof. One pauses, wipes his brow, and says loudly enough for his friends, and for you, to hear, "Hard to get by these days. Some have eaten plenty, though." They chuckle. You keep walking, jaw tight. Inside most households, meals are eaten together from communal bowls. People watch how many spoonfuls you take. They watch the angle of your wrist, the seconds between your bites, how you chew, whether you go back for more. If you finish quickly, they think you're ravenous. If you eat slowly, they think you're savouring too much. If you leave food behind, they think you're pretending to be restrained to hide your true nature. Every gesture becomes data in their never-ending study of your alleged excess. Even fasting periods turn into public tests you automatically fail. During Lent, when everyone is supposed to abstain from meat and indulge only in modest meals, people eye your body like it's a confession. Did you fast properly, they wonder? Did they sneak food? Doesn't look like they're suffering enough. Doesn't matter if your stomach growled through the night, or if you worked yourself sick under a calorie deficit. Your body refuses to perform the aesthetic of hunger, so people assume you didn't feel it. And the hypocrisy? Oh, it's rich. Richer than the broth the town reeve eats behind closed doors. Half the villagers break fast rules quietly, whispering excuses that sound suspiciously like, "God will understand if I have bacon on Sundays." But your body? No excuses, no privacy, no mercy. You're expected to be living proof of perfect restraint, or you're considered a sinner. You reach the butcher's stall next. He's hacking meat with a cleaver that looks older than his father. The slabs of pork glisten in the afternoon light, smelling both tempting and faintly alarming. The butcher looks you up and down with a smirk that practically screams, "Of course you're here!" When you ask the price, he inflates it dramatically. He claims supply is low. He claims the winter will be hard. He claims the pigs were smaller this year. All actual reasons, sure. But then he lowers his voice and says, "Maybe you don't need so much, eh? Others could use a share too." Others. As if you've taken anything from them. As if your body is a crime scene. You walk away without buying anything. The butcher shrugs like he's done a public service. Down another lane, a group of children share a handful of berries, sticky juice staining their fingers. They glance at you nervously, clutching the fruit closer. A little girl whispers, "Don't let them see, or they'll ask for some." You weren't even thinking about their berries. But the fear in her eyes makes your chest tighten. You remember the famine 2 years back. How grain stores ran low. How families hollowed out, cheekbones sharp as blades. How parents gave their portions to children. How some villagers resorted to eating boiled weeds, grass, bark. How every night hunger clung to the thatch like a curse. And during that famine your body became a magnet for hatred. People whispered that you must have secret stores, that you hoarded food, that you received extra rations from the Lord Steward, that you sneaked into fields at night and stole grain. They imagined you devouring meals in private while everyone else withered. No evidence, no reason, just the assumption that your size meant guilt. Someone even confronted you at the well, shouting, "Look at you. You haven't starved enough." As if famine should be visible, as if survival itself was suspicious. You learned quickly to look smaller, to hunch your shoulders, to wrap yourself in loose fabric, to avoid the bakery, to skip meals just to silence rumours. But hunger doesn't shrink you overnight, and medieval people don't understand biology. All they saw was that you maintained some softness, where others sharpened into angles, and they resented you for it. And now, even in a year of decent harvest, the resentment lingers like smoke. Once people believe your size indicates selfishness, they never unbelieve it. You stop by a tavern, where the innkeeper serves thick pottage from a cauldron big enough to drown in. He ladles portions carefully, scanning your face as you approach. When your turn comes, he gives you noticeably less. Barely half a scoop. You start to say something, but he shakes his head. "Best to ration," he says, "for those who need it." For those who need it. He says it while looking directly at your body. You take the bowl, walk outside and sit on a low stone wall. As you lift the spoon to your lips, you hear a murmur behind you. 2 villagers debating whether you should be eating that much. That much is 6 spoonfuls of watery vegetables, and the worst part, you can't defend yourself without sounding guilty. The moment you protest, they roll their eyes thinking, "See, defensive, must be guilty." You swallow the pottage, tasting bitterness that has nothing to do with onions. Feasts aren't any better. At celebrations, harvest festivals, weddings, saints' days, tables overflow with food, but eyes overflow with judgment. If you take a generous portion, people nudge each other. If you take a modest portion, people still nudge each other. Because medieval society loves a paradox. They celebrate abundance, but punish those who appear to enjoy it. During last year's feast of St. Martin, you took a slice of roast goose. 1 slice. A thin one. A child nearby looked at your plate and tugged on her mother's sleeve, whispering way too loudly, "See? That's why there's never enough." Her mother shushed her, but the damage was done. People listened, people nodded, people remembered. Now, moving through the marketplace again, you feel all of that layered on you like extra fabric. Every glance becomes a reminder. Every whisper becomes an accusation. Every hunger pang becomes something you must hide. Because in the Middle Ages, eating is not simply nourishment. It's a public act of morality. And your body, Your natural, living, breathing body is treated as evidence of a crime you did not commit, yet you continue walking, you continue eating, you continue surviving in a world that equates flesh with fault, because beneath the layers of blame and scarcity and suspicion lies one truth medieval society refuses to see. Your body is not excess, it is endurance. The sun sinks lower as you walk toward the centre of town, and the slanting light exposes every uneven stone, every crooked beam, every architectural decision made by someone who clearly despised comfort. Medieval public spaces don't welcome bodies. They challenge them, restrain them, squeeze them, and occasionally threaten to drop you into a cellar hole without warning. And for you, in your larger body, these spaces become not just difficult but deeply humiliating arenas of daily endurance. You turn down a lane that narrows so sharply, it looks like the buildings try to hug each other into collapse. Two carts struggle to pass each other ahead, wheels grinding, drivers shouting, chickens fleeing for their lives. As you approach, the gap shrinks even more. Medieval alleys are the original one-size-fits-none. They twist and squeeze with the whimsical confidence of people who built houses without surveys, measurements, or basic respect for human anatomy. You angle your shoulders, exhale, and begin the sideways shuffle. The walls scrape your cloak. Your hip bumps a protruding beam. A woman carrying a basket presses herself flat, exaggerating the movement just enough to show she thinks she's doing you a favour. You murmur thanks. She nods sympathetically, as if your body is some kind of travelling misfortune she must politely endure. Once you emerge, you take a steadying breath. That was just an alley. Public spaces get much worse. You pass under a low archway next. Medieval builders adored low doorways, perhaps to keep warmth in, perhaps to keep demons out, or perhaps because they simply didn't expect anyone taller or broader than a malnourished apprentice. You duck instinctively. Even so, your cloak snags on a splintering lintel beam. A loose thread catches. You tug. It resists. You tug harder. It rips loudly, just loudly enough that two passing men turn, smirk, and whisper something that includes the words "too big for the world," and maybe they're joking, maybe they're not. In the Middle Ages, every joke has a pointed edge. You keep moving and head toward the market square, but the crowd thickens long before you arrive. Medieval markets are chaos distilled into human form, vendors yelling, animals bleating, children weaving through legs like small sticky spirits. The square is already jammed shoulder to shoulder. Even thin people struggle to navigate spaces this packed. You stand on the edge, already feeling your anxiety spike. You step in anyway. Instantly, elbows jab your ribs. Someone's basket thumps your back. A boy darts past and clips your hip, stumbling dramatically as if you body-checked him on purpose. His mother glares at you like you've committed a public offence against childhood innocence. You turn sideways to allow a woman with a basket of fish to pass. She brushes by, muttering, "God gives trials in many shapes." You're fairly sure you're the shape she means. The market stalls themselves worsen the experience. They're squeezed tightly together under low awnings. Each one offers only a sliver of space to step into. You try to examine a potter's goods, but the stall entrance is barely wider than a famine-year child. You angle yourself carefully, bending slightly to avoid the hanging ceramics. Still, your shoulder hits a dangling jug. It wobbles. Everyone gasps. The potter lunges forward with the reflexes of a man who has lived this nightmare before. "You must be more careful," he says sharply, clutching the jug as if rescuing a newborn. His tone implies you don't belong here, that your presence is danger enough. You apologise and step back, cheeks hot, aware that several people witnessed the near disaster. Someone whispers about how stalls were not built for everyone, in a tone that's far too pointed to be innocent. You move on. Next, the church doors loom ahead, carved with saints who stare down at you with judgmental stone expressions. Churches are central to medieval life. Worship, town meetings, announcements, festivals, funerals. You must enter them often, but the doors, narrow, the aisles, tight, the pews, torture devices. You slip inside as Vespers begins. The scent of incense curls through the air like holy smoke trying to hide the unholy smell of wet wool. You find a bench near the back. The pew is barely wide enough for 2 adults. You lower yourself slowly, carefully, silently pleading with the wood not to creak, which of course means it creaks loudly enough to echo. Several heads turn, a few eyebrows rise. You scoot in. The pew presses your hips on both sides like a medieval vice. When you try to cross your arms, your elbows bump the people next to you. One scoots an inch away with exaggerated delicacy, as though you have committed a sin simply by existing in this space. Kneeling is even worse. Medieval kneelers are thin planks designed by someone who clearly never knelt. When you lower yourself, the bench groans again, and you lean forward, trying to distribute your weight as evenly as possible. Your joints scream. Your back protests. The person in front glances back each time you shift, making sure you're not infringing on their blessed personal space. When the congregation rises, you rise a beat slower. Not because you're incapable, because in these clothes, in these spaces, in this body, you must calculate every motion like a chess move. One wrong angle and you bump a pew, disturb a neighbour, or make enough noise to earn another round of stairs. After the service, you leave quickly, partly for space, partly for air. But the outdoors offers its own trials. As you wander past the mill, you come to a set of wooden stairs leading to the upper walkway. The stairs are narrow, steep, and crooked, the architectural equivalent of a drunken dare. You place your foot on the first step. It creaks. You test the second. It groans. By the third, a group of teenagers lounging on a barrel watch you with mischievous anticipation. Medieval teens are sharp-eyed gremlins who live for moments like this. One whispers, "Bet the stairs collapse." Another snorts, "Bet they don't even make it halfway." You keep climbing, jaw tight, refusing to give them satisfaction. But the fear is real, not just of falling, but of being watched falling. Because in a world obsessed with reading your body as evidence, one misstep becomes a story that spreads faster than ale spills. Up top, you catch your breath. The teens shrug and lose interest. No collapse, no chaos, no entertainment. You descend just as carefully, aware that the real challenge isn't the stairs themselves, but navigating them under an audience. You head next toward the tavern, hoping for warmer air and a moment to sit in peace. But taverns are not built for comfort either. The doorway is narrow, the ceiling low, the floor crowded. You squeeze inside. The benches are long and splintered, forcing you to sit with strangers who either shift away dramatically or pretend not to notice you while absolutely noticing you. The benches creak with every movement. The table edge digs into your stomach. When the tavern keeper hands you a mug, the man beside you glances down at your midsection, then at the mug, then away, as if offering silent commentary that doesn't need words. You drink anyway, because there's no space in medieval life where your body doesn't become part of the architecture, pushing against it, squeezed by it, judged by its inability to accommodate you. And then there's travel. You exit the tavern and stand beside a cart preparing to leave for the next village. The driver eyes you skeptically. "Cart's delicate," he says. "Not made for heavy loads." He doesn't say people like you, but he doesn't need to. You choose to walk instead, because walking may be exhausting, but it's less humiliating than arguing with a stranger about whether your existence might break his vehicle. Even public seating, if it exists, is a gauntlet. Low stone walls, wobbly stools, narrow benches, all of them force you to calculate how to sit without creaking, breaking, crowding, or drawing attention. Even leaning against a wall becomes political because someone always assumes you're only resting due to personal weakness rather than the universal exhaustion of medieval life. By evening, you return home exhausted not just from distance or labour, but from negotiating your body through spaces built to exclude you. A house built in a famine era expects smallness. A village built by people conditioned to scarcity assumes thinness. A society that interprets body size as morality creates a world where architecture itself becomes judgment, and yet you move through it anyway. You squeeze through alleys, you duck under beams, You endure creaking pews, you climb impossible stairs, you sit at cramped tables, you walk beside carts instead of riding on them. Each act, however ordinary, becomes a quiet defiance. Because in this medieval world where space is a privilege, your body insists on existing in every inch of it, even when the space is pushed back. The sky bruises into twilight as you leave the cramped tavern behind, and the cold air hits your cheeks like a reminder that comfort is a modern privilege. In the Middle Ages, even the simplest desire to feel well, to feel normal, is out of reach. Because tonight, as aches gather in your joints and tiredness settles deep in your bones, you know exactly what comes next. Not rest, not tea, not a hot bath. But the looming shadow of medieval medicine. And if the healers you've already visited were bad, the treatments specifically designed for bodies like yours are an entirely separate nightmare. Your neighbour, an older woman with the kind of brittle honesty that can extract confessions just by raising an eyebrow, catches sight of you as you pass her cottage. She tusks loudly, the universal medieval greeting for "you look like trouble to your health and everyone else's peace of mind." She waves you closer. "You're looking way down," she says, eyes lingering just a fraction too long on your torso. You know where this is going, but politeness traps you. She pulls you inside before you can protest. The cottage is warm and dim, filled with bundles of herbs hanging from the rafters, sage, thyme, rosemary, plants that look like misunderstandings of plants. A pot simmers over the fire, releasing an aroma that tastes like illness just by smelling it. She gestures for you to sit on a stool that wobbles under you in a way that makes your stomach clench. Before you can form a polite excuse, she launches into the medieval lecture you've heard a dozen times already. Your humours are unbalanced. Of course. You've eaten too many warming foods? Naturally. You're retaining moisture. Always. You should purge. And here we go. She hands you a cup filled with a thick, murky liquid that looks as though someone strained a swamp through a sock. You hesitate, but she stares at you with the intensity of someone who once threatened a grown man with a ladle. You drink. The taste hits instantly. Bitter, sour, earthy, and somehow also spicy in a way no spice intended. Your throat burns. Your stomach recoils. Your eyes water. She nods approvingly and says, "Good. That'll get things moving." You're afraid to ask what "things" refers to. The purging starts before you are even halfway home. You spend the next hour in your dark cottage, doubled over a bucket, discovering new ways your body can betray you. And when it's over, when you're trembling, sweating, empty, your neighbour peeks in again with the innocent audacity of someone who thinks she helped. "You'll feel lighter," she says cheerfully. "If not, we'll do bloodletting tomorrow." You do not feel lighter. You feel like a wrung-out cloth. Bloodletting is one of the most common treatments recommended for people with larger bodies. According to medieval logic, fat is caused by excess blood and phlegm. The solution? Drain you like a wineskin. But medieval bloodletting isn't done in clean spaces with metal tools sterilised by science. It's done with blades washed in cold water, leeches stored in questionable jars, and hands that have touched absolutely everything except soap. The next day, because of course the neighbour tells the village healer you need help, you find yourself sitting on a stool in his cottage as he sharpens a small blade on a stone. The sound is slow, rhythmic, far too deliberate. You consider running, but in this society refusing treatment labels you uncooperative, suspicious, sinful. The healer ties a strip of cloth around your arm to make the vein swell. Then, with the precision of a man who has done this way too often, he pricks your skin. Blood beads, then flows into a bowl you pointedly avoid looking at. The healer hums contentedly as he watches, completely untroubled by the fact that he's draining life from a living person as casually as milking a goat. "You're full of heat," he explains. "This will cool you." You feel faint, but he interprets that as confirmation that it's working. Some treatments are even stranger. Sweating cures, for instance. You're wrapped in blankets, tucked near a fire, and slathered with warming ointments that smell like an argument between onions and pine tar. The goal is to melt the fat, In reality, you sit there dripping sweat, praying not to faint or suffocate, while the healer occasionally pats your forehead and says things like, "You're releasing bad moisture." Other times they stuff you into a sweat hut, a wooden box with your head protruding from the top, while hot stones smoulder around your legs. It feels like being roasted alive by a very apologetic cooking pot. At one point, you cough from the heat, and the healer adds more stones, convinced your distress is spiritual. Then come the diets. Medieval diets are not modern diets. They're punishment disguised as discipline. One healer recommends you eat only leeks for 3 days. Another says you should consume nothing but vinegar water until your inner fires dim. Another insists you avoid bread entirely, an impossible feat in a society where bread is not just food but identity. A monk suggests you spend a week fasting for spiritual purification. When you explain you still need energy to work, he tells you work done in weakness is holier. Holier perhaps, but not survivable. And then there are the external treatments. One healer stretches your skin with warm cloths and massages your sides aggressively, convinced he's kneading fat into better distribution. It feels like being punished for a crime you don't remember committing. Another places warm cups, hollowed animal horns, on your arms and back to draw bad humours to the surface. The suction bruises your skin. People later see the marks and assume they're proof you're diseased. The worst is the physician with a university education, the one dressed in dark robes who smells faintly of ink and self-importance. He flips through a thick manuscript and diagnoses your size as corruption of bodily humours, recommending a daily routine of purging, vomiting, sweating, prayer, and consuming bitter herbs that grow near graveyards. Graveyard herbs are potent, he says proudly. You don't ask why they grow there. You already know the answer is unsettling. To make matters worse, these treatments are public knowledge. Medieval communities lack privacy. Everyone knows when the healer stops by. Everyone knows when you fainted from a purge. Everyone knows when the monk recommended fasting and you didn't lose weight. They interpret every failed treatment as proof that your body is rebellious, gluttonous, disobedient. If the treatment hurts, they call it necessary. If the treatment fails, they call it your fault. You overhear whispers while fetching water. Still big after all that bloodletting? Too much flesh drives out remedies. God tests some bodies more than others. One woman even suggests you must be resisting the treatment spiritually, as though your fat has become a moral entity capable of fighting off holy intentions. And despite everything, the bleeding, the sweating, the starving, the herbs, your body does not transform into the fantasy shape medieval society wants. It remains itself, stubborn and alive, a living reminder that human biology cannot be bullied into submission by superstition. Eventually, you stop seeking treatment unless forced, not because you lack discipline, but because discipline has been weaponized against you. Every healer, every neighbour, every monk believes your size is a condition to be cured, even if the cure destroys you. One evening, as you limp home from yet another session of therapeutic sweating, a passing farmer calls out, "You'd feel better if you walked more." You were walking. You are always walking. Your entire life is walking. But in this world, effort never counts unless it comes with visible thinness. Pain never counts unless it makes you smaller. Suffering never counts unless it aligns with their beliefs. And so you endure the treatments, you endure the expectations, you endure the scrutiny, and still your body exists. Still your heart beats. Still you move through a world determined to reshape you. And every day you survive their cures, you prove a truth stronger than any medieval theory. Your body is not a sickness. Their misunderstanding is. Night settles slowly over the village, the last streaks of daylight stretching thin across the rooftops like the final threads of a frayed tapestry. You make your way toward the communal square, where a small crowd gathers around a messenger reading aloud a marriage announcement. His voice carries across the cobbles, sharp, nasal, far too pleased with its own authority. People listen with rapt attention, whispering, nodding, judging. And you linger at the edge, watching the unfolding ritual with the uneasy familiarity of someone who knows exactly how brutal the medieval marriage market can be, especially for a body like yours. Because here, in the Middle Ages, marriage isn't romance, it's economy, it's strategy, it's survival, and nobody hides the fact that your body is a negotiation point, a bargaining chip, a liability, or, rarely, a small advantage, only under extremely specific conditions. Love barely enters the equation. Waistlines do. Tonight's announcement is simple. A local miller's daughter, age 16, is set to marry a brewer's apprentice. The crowd reacts predictably. Women whisper about her dowry. Not much, but enough. Men discuss her fertility. Strong hips good for bearing sons. Someone jokes that the brewer's apprentice is lucky because she's not too plump, not too thin. You sigh. Already the body talk begins. Because in this world, marriage is the one arena where body size becomes a public, loud, relentless metric. Prospects are weighed, literally and figuratively. A thin bride is praised for her discipline, but pitied if she looks fragile. A plump bride is praised for her health, only up to a point. Beyond that, she becomes a cautionary tale, and a large groom, well, the expectations shift yet again. You move through the crowd, listening. She's well-shaped, one woman says approvingly. She'll manage the household, another adds. But not too fleshy, an elderly man says, as though grading produce. The comments skim over your skin like burrs. You know the script too well. When it's your turn to be evaluated, the tone changes. Subtlety dies. People speak as if you aren't even a participant in your own future. You flash back to that day last year when a matchmaker visited your family. She was small, alert, wrapped in more shawls than temperature justified. She circled you like a merchant assessing a horse, nodding occasionally, making soft humming sounds that were not reassuring. She has presence, she said slowly, as though inventing a polite word for big. She has strong arms, your mother offered. The matchmaker smiled thinly. Strong arms are useful, yes, but marriage requires balance. Balance. A nice word for your size will cause negotiations to collapse. She scribbled something in her ledger, something that made her eyebrows twitch, and left without offering any names of potential suitors. It didn't surprise you. In a village like this, everyone knows who is marriage material and who is a risky bargain. Risky. Not because you lack skills, not because you lack kindness or intelligence or work ethic. No, risky because you might eat too much. Risky because childbirth, already a perilous gamble, is assumed to be even more dangerous for you. Risky because a larger wife is considered harder to manage, a medieval euphemism with layers of unpleasant implications. Risky because people believe a husband should lead and a wife should be modest, and they interpret size as defiance. And yet marriage is essential. It determines your social protection, your economic stability, your place in the community. A single woman is pitied at best, ridiculed at worst, suspected of moral failings, feared for supposed temptations, and sometimes even blamed for attracting bad luck. Remaining unmarried is rarely peaceful. You keep walking, passing a group of mothers comparing their daughters' prospects. My Anna will marry well, one says proudly. She's slender now, but she eats well. She'll fill out after marriage. Good, another mother replies, but not too much. No man wants a wife who takes up more room than he does. They both laugh. You don't. Farther ahead, you overhear the opposite problem. A father worried because his daughter is too thin. She looks sickly, he mutters. No man wants a wife who'll die before childbirth. It never occurs to anyone that women have personalities, skills, thoughts. No, blessed simplicity, this society sees only shapes and what those shapes promise. You turn down a side street where lanterns glow faintly against timber walls. A young couple sits near a doorway whispering. The girl glances your way as you pass. Her face softens, not in pity, but something like apology. Perhaps she knows the pressure too, in her own way. She squeezes her lover's hand. They want me to marry the tailor's son, she whispers, but he says I'm too round. The boy frowns, brushing her cheek. Then he's a fool. She gives him a small smile. The kind of smile people only allow themselves in hidden corners, But you have no hidden corner. Your body stands out everywhere. Even your family contributes, in their own anxious, unhelpful ways. Your aunt once pulled you aside and whispered, "If you ate less bread, you'd marry sooner." As if marriage were a prize you win by reducing yourself into someone else's ideal shape. Another relative, more superstitious than practical, suggested tying a ribbon around your waist to train the flesh to behave. You declined, politely, but she still clucks every time she sees you. The pain isn't just emotional, it's strategic. Dowries change based on body size. A bride considered less desirable might require a larger dowry to secure a match. That means more financial burden on your family, which they sometimes voice without meaning to wound, but wound nonetheless. "We can't afford more," your father once muttered, not realizing you were close enough to hear. "If only—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. As evening deepens, you wander toward the manor house, where wealthier families negotiate marriages with even sharper calculations. In noble circles, body size carries a different weight, symbolism, prestige, aesthetic expectation. A slender lady suggests discipline and elegance. A fuller one suggests maternal promise or indulgence, depending on who's doing the judging. For noblemen, a larger body often signifies overconsumption or lack of martial prowess. Courtly love poems are full of descriptions of delicate limbs and graceful figures. Nobody writes sonnets about strong thighs and hearty appetites. At feasts you've seen noble women glance at you from across the hall, whispering behind jewelled hands. "Such a poor match," one said once. "Who would risk children with someone so heavy?" Meanwhile, her own husband, round as a harvest moon, stuffed himself with honey pastries. But noble bodies operate under different rules. Men may expand, women must not. You recall a moment at a midsummer dance when a potential suitor, a merchant's son, approached you with a forced smile. He asked if you wished to dance. You nodded, hopeful, heart fluttering. But when the music sped up, he lost rhythm, stumbled, and blamed you. "You step too heavily," he said sharply, cheeks red from embarrassment. "It's hard to lead," his friend snickered. "You left early. That night the humiliation followed you home like a ghost. But worst of all is gossip. Medieval gossip spreads like fire on thatched roofs. Every rejected proposal becomes a tale. Every near match becomes speculation. Every man who hesitates becomes a rumour. Every time someone hears that a suitor changed his mind, people add their own commentary. She's too big. She's too slow. She'd cost too much to feed. She'd embarrass him in church. She'd never survive childbirth. They'd never fit in the same bed. That last one was said by a drunk in the tavern, loudly, cruelly, with laughter echoing around him. You pretended not to hear. But the words lodged like splinters, and still, you endure the marriage market scrutiny. You show up at festivals. You help neighbours. You carry water, knead dough, mend fabric, tend fires, and keep households running. You laugh, you listen, you breathe, you exist with a tenderness medieval society tries to beat out of you, because the truth is this: marriage here isn't about love, it's about reputation, and your body, in their eyes, speaks too loudly. But you continue anyway. You refuse to shrink yourself physically or spiritually to fit another person's checklist. You keep moving through the lanes as stars prick the darkening sky. Somewhere another marriage is announced. Another couple is matched. Another whispered judgment passes through the night air. Yet beneath all the noise, all the calculations, all the uninvited opinions, another truth pulses quietly, stubbornly. Your worth is not determined by who chooses you. Your worth is that you choose yourself, and that, in a world built on cruel measurements, is the bravest act of all. Dawn creeps back over the village soft and grey, and the first clangs of work echo across the waking streets. You stretch your stiff limbs, brush the sleep from your eyes and step outside, only to be met by the sound of hammers, the smell of tanned leather, and the unmistakable squawk of a rooster that has absolutely no concept of indoor voice. Another day begins, and with it comes yet another arena, where your size becomes a battlefield. The medieval workplace. Guilds, workshops, apprenticeships, and labour roles each demand a body shaped by ceaseless toil, and the moment yours deviates, the world sharpens its gaze. You walk toward the centre of town where the guild halls cluster like sturdy old guardians. Their timbered walls are darkened by soot and age, doors decorated with carved symbols, anvil for blacksmiths, shears for weavers, tankard for brewers. These halls promise stability, opportunity, skill, but only for those who meet expectations. And in the Middle Ages, expectations about bodies are as rigid as iron, yet somehow as flimsy as gossip. A group of apprentices sweeps the cobblestones outside the blacksmith's forge. They're thin, wiry, covered in soot, and full of the restless energy of boys determined to impress their masters. When you approach, they pause, exchanging looks. One nudges another and whispers, "Imagine them swinging a hammer." The second laughs quietly. The joke spreads like wildfire, their snickers following you as you walk past. Inside the forge, the heat slams into your face like a wall. The blacksmith himself, a massive man with arms the size of tree trunks, pounds a glowing horseshoe on an anvil. Sparks dance like fireflies. He glances at you briefly, not unkindly, but with that look you've seen 100 times, the quick calculation of whether your size equals strength or hindrance. "Looking for work?" he asks, voice booming. You consider answering. You've always admired blacksmiths, the artistry, the raw power, the rhythm of metal shaped by will, but you hesitate, because you know the next question, the question that always comes. Can you keep up? Keep up, the phrase that haunts your entire working life. Medieval jobs assume endurance, speed, agility. Traits society insists you lack before you even demonstrate otherwise. You give a non-committal shrug, and he grunts, returning to his work. You leave the forge before the apprentices can smirk again. Next, you pass the carpenter's workshop. Sawdust perfumes the air, long planks lean against the walls. The carpenter's wife sweeps the floor, a task she performs with more precision than her husband applies to his craft. When she sees you, she straightens, gives an apologetic smile, and says, "We're not taking new help." She doesn't explain why, but the reason hangs between you like an invisible rope. Your size makes you, in their minds, clumsy, risky, too likely to snap a stepladder, or crack a beam, or drop a piece of timber. You move on. The Weavers' Guild is bustling next. The windows glow with morning light filtering through stretched wool. Inside, rows of looms creak as women and men work their shuttles. You approach, drawn by the rhythm. Weaving is a skill that prizes patience, focus, and steady hands, skills you possess. But the loom frames are narrow, the benches are fixed, the aisles between them demand the slender agility of people who rarely question the space they occupy. A guild master spots you. His expression is polite but guarded. Apprentices are expected to move quickly, he says, to fit the benches, to lean in close. His eyes flick briefly to your hips, your shoulders. The message is clear. The equipment was not built for someone like you. You nod, throat tight, and back away. Outside, you sit on a low stone wall and watch the world work. Farmers hurry by with rakes and baskets. A baker's boy races past carrying dough. A group of cooper's apprentices haul wooden hoops toward barrels. Every occupation demands something physical, something precise, something public. And you, strong, capable, resilient, are shut out. Not because you lack skill, but because society decided your body implies incompetence. Word travels quickly in small towns. Everyone knows who's seeking work. Within hours of asking around, you hear the same excuses again and again. We're full. We can't pay another worker. You'd tire too quickly. Our tools aren't suited. Customers expect a certain presentation. That last one stings. Presentation is medieval code for thinness. People want their artisans to look a certain way, lean, hard-working, shaped by modest meals and constant motion. They believe thin bodies represent skill, while larger bodies represent indulgence. It's nonsense, but nonsense with consequences. One merchant even has the gall to say, if a worker looks greedy, the customers assume greed in craft, as if your body somehow changes the quality of a pot or a shoe. Desperate for something to do, you join a group heading to the fields. Harvest work is always available. Brutal, endless, underpaid, but available. The overseer eyes you skeptically. "Can you keep pace?" he asks. There it is again. You nod anyway. 'Cause you need work, you need coin, you need dignity. The day begins with cutting barley. You bend, slice, gather, repeat. The motion strains your lower back, but you keep going. Sweat drips down your spine, the sun climbs. The work demands a rhythm, and you find it. But every time you slow even slightly, the overseer's whistle blows sharply. "You there," he shouts, "move quicker." You glance around. Others have slowed too, but he only notices you. Later it's time to haul bundles. The sheaves are heavier than they look. You lift them anyway, hugging the scratchy stalks to your chest as straw pricks your wrists. Villagers watch. Some nod approvingly. Others snicker when you stumble on uneven ground. "She's struggling," someone mutters. "Too much weight makes the work harder," another adds. "It's not the work," a third whispers. "It's them." Their words trail behind you like shadows. At midday, everyone gathers under a sparse cluster of trees to drink water and eat bread. You take a small piece, smaller than you want, because you know eyes are on you. A young man across the circle nudges his friend and says loudly, "Look how little they eat." Trying to seem modest? You can't win. Eat more, you're greedy. Eat less, you're pretending. Eat normally, and they still draw conclusions. The afternoon brings threshing. Heavy sticks smashing grain free from stalks. The repetitive motion burns your arms. Your hands blister. Your tunic sticks to your skin. And when you pause to stretch your aching back, someone behind you tisks. "I knew they'd be slow. I knew they wouldn't last the day. But you do last. You push through the ache, the heat, the breathlessness. You outwork some of the very people criticizing you. By sunset, your muscles tremble, but you're still standing. The overseer takes note, not kindly, but with grudging surprise. "Didn't think you'd manage," he says, handing you a few coins. "Though you could move lighter on your feet." You accept the pay. You do not accept the judgment. Because the truth is, medieval workplaces don't just judge your performance. They judge your presence, your silhouette, your breath, your posture, your steps. Every move becomes evidence in their never-ending case against your body. You limp home, exhausted, and pass a group of men outside the tavern. They glance at your tired gait and laugh. "Work too hard for someone of that size," one says. "Maybe next time they'll pick a task they're built for." You want to ask what task that would be. You already know the answer. None. Medieval society doesn't believe larger bodies belong anywhere except in cautionary tales. And yet you keep going, you keep showing up, you keep offering your skills, your labour, your determination. You keep proving them wrong even if they refuse to see it. Because in a world that excludes you from work, you still work. In a world that doubts your worth, you still contribute. In a world that measures you unfairly, you measure yourself honestly. And every day you pry another coin from the hands of a society that thinks you deserve none. You carve out a space they never intended to give you. The next morning breaks colder than usual, the kind of cold that slips beneath wool and linen like a sly insult. Your breath clouds the air as you walk toward the village green, drawn by the commotion gathering there. Men with spears and dented helmets cluster in loose formation, talking loudly, laughing even louder, while the reeve takes attendance with bored authority. Today is militia practice. A civic obligation that most men dread, most women observe, and absolutely no one believes is optional. And for you, in your larger body, this duty becomes yet another public stage where strength is ignored, effort is dismissed, and ridicule lurks at every corner. Militia service isn't glamorous. There's no shining armour, no heroic tales, no parade marches. Just poorly forged weapons, borrowed helmets that smell like decades of sweat, and drills overseen by the one man in town who believes shouting is a form of leadership. As you approach, the captain, A grizzled veteran with a limp and the temperament of a kicked bull spots you instantly. His eyes narrow with familiar skepticism. "You again," he mutters. "Try not to drop your spear this time. You didn't drop your spear last time, someone else did, but medieval memory works like medieval maps, full of errors, confidently believed. Still, you nod and take your place among the other recruits. Some shuffle away, subtly widening the space between you and them. Others pretend they didn't notice you at all. One young man, a wiry, smug apprentice, grins at his friend and whispers, "Hope the ground doesn't shake when they march." You put on the helmet. It's too tight. It pinches your forehead. The strap digs into your jaw. The padding smells like it lost a battle against mould. But you endure. The captain hands you a spear. The shaft is long and unwieldy, the wood splintered and rough. You grip it anyway. Medieval weapons are not designed with ergonomics in mind. They are sticks with sharp ends, forged by a blacksmith 3 cups of ale deep. "Line up," the captain roars. The men snap into formation, some confidently, some clumsily. You step into place, adjusting your stance to avoid bumping the person beside you. But the moment you do, the captain strides over, prodding your elbow. "Stand narrower," he barks. "You take up too much room." You almost laugh at the irony. Everything in medieval life is built too narrow, too cramped, too unforgiving. But this, somehow, is your fault. The drill begins with marching. Not elegant marching, awkward, stomping, out-of-sync tramping that sounds like a herd of cows attempting choreography. You step carefully, keeping pace, but the loose earth shifts under your foot and your stride falters. It's minor, barely noticeable. But the boy 2 rows ahead snickers. "Told you," he whispers to his friend. "Heavy feet." You keep marching. Next come spear drills, raise, lower, thrust, withdraw. The movements require precision, timing, balance. Your arms burn by the 10th repetition, but so do everyone else's. Still, the captain singles you out. "Don't lean your weight forward so much, you'll topple," he barks. You're not leaning any more than he is. But medieval critique is a spear aimed at your form long before it's aimed at your skill. After that, it's shield work. The militia has only 6 shields, each battered and warped. You're handed one that weighs more than a sack of grain and smells faintly of old rain and fear. You lift it anyway, muscles trembling, adjusting to its uneven balance. "Raise it higher," someone shouts. "Lower, you're blocking the line," another yells moments later. "You cannot win." When the captain pairs men for mock combat, you're assigned the smallest partner in the group, a young thin boy who barely holds his spear upright. He looks terrified to be matched with you, as if your size alone might crush him like a beetle. You try to go easy, careful not to overwhelm him, but the moment your spear taps his shield with moderate force, he stumbles dramatically, falling backward into the dirt. The men roar with laughter. The captain shakes his head. "Control your strength," he snaps. "Try not to flatten the lad." As if that's what happened, as if that was your intention. When it's your turn to be on the defensive, the boy jabs weakly at your shield. You brace yourself, but the shield strap rubs painfully against your palm and you shift your grip. It's a tiny adjustment, but enough for another man to scoff. "They always look clumsy," he says, loud enough for half the formation to hear. "Too slow for real fighting." You want to point out that in actual battle, nobody is graceful. Everyone flails, everyone panics, everyone trembles. But pointing out reality rarely helps when prejudice is easier to believe. After the drills, the captain orders everyone to practice moving quickly across the field. "Agility," he hollers. "War requires agility." You run. It's not elegant. It's not swift. Your boots sink into the grass. Your breathing grows heavy, your armour clinks loudly. But you run, faster than some, longer than others, but the men don't see that. They see the bounce of your steps, the strain in your breath, the curve of your body, and interpret it as failure. Someone mutters, "Imagine them trying to climb a siege ladder." Another laughs. They'd get stuck halfway up. You've climbed ladders before, hard ones, work ladders, farm ladders, rope ladders. But these men don't care about skill, only spectacle. The captain dismisses you all with a grunt. As the men disperse, a few exchange exaggerated groans. Clutching their backs and joking about how they felt the ground tremble during practice, you walk away silently. Because anything you say will be twisted into defensiveness, or worse, proof that you take things too seriously. But militia duty isn't the only civic responsibility shaped by judgment. Watch rotations are worse. Every household must send someone to guard the village at night. When your turn comes, people mutter about whether you can stay awake long enough. Last time, when you leaned against the palisade for a moment to rest your aching legs, a man passing by smirked and said, "Falling asleep already? Should have chosen someone lighter to keep the wall safe. You weren't asleep, just tired. Everyone gets tired. Weapon drills too. Bow practice is nearly impossible. Medieval bows require immense strength. And even strong bodies struggle. You manage a few shots, but your arms shake afterward, and someone inevitably comments, 'No wonder they have trouble. Fat weighs down the limbs.' You want to respond, 'Malnutrition weighs down yours,' but you hold your tongue. Because retorts in this world travel fast and return sharper. Worst are the emergency drills, the ones where villagers practice forming shield walls or carrying injured townsfolk. When you help lift a straw dummy meant to represent a fallen soldier, someone jokes that you're better suited to being the dummy than carrying it. Another says, 'Imagine needing to rescue them. You'd need 4 men. The cruelty is breathtaking sometimes, not because it's unique. Medieval humour relies heavily on mockery, but because it's so confidently wrong. They mistake your size for weakness, your effort for excess, your presence for inconvenience. And yet, you keep showing up. Every time militia practice returns, you're there. You march, thrust, guard, and run. You do the work, you follow instructions, you improve, you persist, because civic duty isn't optional. And because quitting would only confirm their biases, and because deep inside, beneath the frustration and fatigue, there's a stubborn ember that refuses to dim. As the day ends and you walk home, the aches echo through your body. But so does the truth. You survived another drill, another round of jokes, another public stage designed to make you feel out of place, and you didn't break. Not on the uneven field, not under the weight of the shield. Not beneath the eyes of men who have never known the strength it takes simply to keep going in a world built against you. In this century, where public duty exposes every flaw and society believes bodies tell moral stories, you continue to stand your ground, not because they believe you can, but because you already know you have. The next day dawns grey and swollen with mist, the kind that settles low over the earth like a damp wool blanket. You step outside your cottage, boots sinking slightly into the muddy ground, and take in the quiet hush of early morning. It would almost feel peaceful, if not for the dread coiling in your stomach, because today you're travelling, and in the Middle Ages travel is not some gentle scenic stroll or cosy carriage ride. It's an ordeal, a risk, a test, a gauntlet thrown directly at your feet. And for a body like yours, every mile stretches longer, harsher, and far more humiliating. You head toward the main road, a road that would barely qualify as a suggestion in the modern world. It's a twisting, rutted path of mud, stones, and the occasional puddle deep enough to drown a duck. The village reeve asked you to deliver a message to a settlement several miles away. Too far for comfort, too close to refuse. Travel is currency here. Favour, obligation, proof of responsibility. Decline too many errands, and people talk, accept them, and your body becomes everyone's favourite subject. At the road's edge, you stand beside a cart preparing to depart. The cart is rickety, its wheels wobble, its wood swollen from rain, its frame held together by hope and a few questionable nails. The cart driver eyes you wearily, chewing a stalk of grain. "You riding?" he asks. You hesitate. Riding would save your feet, your back, your lungs. Riding would help, but you know exactly what comes next. He squints at you, looks at the cart, then back at you. He mutters. "Cart's not meant for too much weight." There it is, the familiar sting. "It's fine," you say quickly. "I'll walk." He nods, relieved not to risk a broken axle. The cart clatters forward. You watch it go with a mix of bitterness and resolve. Then you begin walking. The road is uneven. Every step demands attention. Roots jut from the earth like tripping hazards placed by mischievous spirits. Pebbles roll beneath your boots. Mud sucks at your feet, tugging with each step. Within minutes your calves burn. Your breath fogs in quick bursts, but you push on. Travel isn't optional in medieval life. People walk everywhere. To fields, to markets, to festivals, to funerals, to neighbouring villages, to pilgrimage sites days or weeks away. Bodies are transportation, and when your body is larger, people assume the effort is your punishment for size, not the universal consequence of living in an era with no infrastructure. As you continue, a group of traders approaches from behind, leading a pair of pack mules loaded with goods. They step around you carefully but not silently. One trader whispers, "Slow going with them on the road." Another chuckles, "Hope the bridge holds." Your jaw tightens. You keep walking. You soon reach the first obstacle, a tiny wooden footbridge spanning a narrow stream. It's narrow, so narrow that even two average bodies can barely cross side by side. You place one foot on the planks, they creak. You test another step. The wood groans. Someone watching from behind sucks in a dramatic breath. "It's old," you say. "It's strained," someone mutters. You cross anyway, slowly, carefully. The bridge holds. On the other side, children playing near the bank stare. One little boy whispers to his friend, "See? I told you the planks would bend." The friend gasps. "Did it almost break?" "No," the boy says, disappointed. "But almost, always almost." People in this era love imagining your body breaking things, even when it never actually does. You continue along the road. A few miles later, the path narrows between overgrown hedges. Branches scratch your cloak, snagging on seams. You twist your shoulders to avoid thorns, but the path still squeezes you. And of course, as you maneuver sideways, two shepherds appear from the opposite direction with a flock of sheep. The shepherds' eyes widen at the bottleneck created by your presence. They mutter something about tight spaces and gesture for you to press into the hedges to let them pass. Thorns jab your arms, sheep jostle by, you smile tightly, pretending the entire situation isn't humiliating. Further on, the road dips into a shallow valley where a puddle has grown into a miniature lake. A thin person could hop across stones sticking out from the mud. You consider it, but the stones are slick, unstable, designed by nature to betray you. So you wade through, water sloshing above your ankles. Mud clings to your cloak. Your boots fill with cold wetness. Someone watching from a distant field snickers, shaking his head at the image of you soaked to the calves. But you keep walking. Hours pass. Your legs ache. Your back throbs. Your feet feel like lead. Travel in this era destroys the body in small, relentless ways. If you were thinner, you'd still ache. You'd still stumble. You'd still gasp uphill. But because you're not thin, the world attributes every sign of fatigue to size alone. You reach a hill next, a steep one, the kind medieval people describe as gentle, only because they're used to vertical suffering. You brace yourself and climb. Your heart hammers. Your breath grows loud, and sure enough, when two villagers crest the hill above you, they pause to stare. "Hard climb, eh?" one says. "Especially for them," the other adds. You don't answer. You simply keep climbing one determined step at a time. At the top, the wind hits, sharp, cold. You adjust your cloak, pulling it tight, but even this movement invites commentary. A passing pilgrim glances at you and murmurs, "Shouldn't be winded yet. Overburdened bodies struggle with the Lord's paths." Overburdened. As if your body is luggage you insist on hauling around. As if you didn't climb the same hill as they did. Farther along you reach a small clearing where a mounted nobleman approaches. His horse, elegant and well-fed, steps aside with trained precision. The nobleman eyes you briefly, then quickly averts his gaze, hiding a faint smirk. It's the kind of smirk that says he assumes you wish you could ride too, that he knows you won't be offered a saddle, not on his horse, not on anyone's, and he's right. Medieval saddles are narrow, fragile, built for bodies shaped by constant scarcity. Not built for you. Even if someone did offer you a horse, they'd immediately regret it the moment the animal dipped under the weight of armour, supplies and rider combined. Not because you're too heavy, but because medieval horses are smaller than modern ones. People forget that. You pass an inn next, its wooden sign creaking in the breeze. You consider stopping to rest your feet, but the memory of the last time you tried makes you falter. The innkeeper had looked you up and down, then jerked his thumb toward a stool and said, "Careful with that one, legs are thin." You don't stop. Instead, you continue toward the next village, trudging through the last miles, with grit you rarely acknowledge. Your body is tired, yes, but it's also resilient, stronger than they assume, more capable than their whispers, more determined than their doubts. At last you reach the settlement. You deliver the message to the Reeves' assistant, a thin, narrow-faced woman who looks at you as though surprised you made it intact. "That was quick," she says. You blink. Quick. You feel like you've walked through 3 different climate zones. But she nods, as if adjusting her mental map. "Well done. Most people complain." You nearly laugh. If you complain, people say it's because of your size. If you don't complain, people assume the journey was easy. You cannot win. On the return journey, a rainstorm breaks. Sheets of water soak you instantly. Mud clings to your boots. Every step grows heavier. But you keep going, because you must. Because waiting out the storm means arriving home after dark, and travel after dark is dangerous. Thieves, wolves, spirits, people's imaginations running wild. Lightning flashes. Thunder follows. On a narrow stretch of road, you slip. Your foot slides in mud. Your knee buckles. You steady yourself, but a sharp pain shoots up your leg. You grit your teeth, straighten, and keep walking, even though your breath shivers through clenched teeth. If you limp into town, someone will comment. Someone always comments. "A long day," they'll ask. Or worse, travel's harder for some. But when you finally arrive, wet, sore, exhausted, you don't fall. You don't break. You don't collapse on the road like they imagine. You made it. Because medieval travel isn't designed for anyone, but they still expect you to perform it flawlessly and judge you when you struggle, yet you continue every step, every mile, every hill, every bridge, because your body, despite the world's assumptions, carries you forward. And that in this unforgiving century is a triumph of its own. The storm has passed by the time dawn rises again, pale and tired-looking, as though the sky itself feels the weight of another medieval day. You step outside cautiously, testing your sore knee, rolling your shoulders beneath the stiff fabric of your cloak. The village seems quieter this morning, muted, watchful, the way places always feel after a night of heavy rain. But the stillness does nothing to soften what waits ahead. Because in this world, your body is always being evaluated, always being interpreted, always being blamed. And nothing intensifies that blame more than illness, injury, or age. Here in the Middle Ages, health is not private. It is a public spectacle. And when you're visibly larger, every cough, every ache, every stumble becomes proof. Proof. They insist that your size is dangerous, sinful, self-inflicted, or simply inevitable. You make your way toward the well to wash your hands. A few women are already gathered there, drawing water, exchanging gossip with the efficient sharpness of people who could weaponize small talk. The moment you approach, their conversation dips, not silent, not rude, just a shift. A lowering of tone, the way people do when they're about to talk about someone instead of to them. One of them glances at your swollen knee. "Travel was too much," she says, not unkindly, but not kindly either. Bodies like that strain easily. Bodies like that. You draw water, ignoring the prickle in your chest, and begin to wash. But another woman joins in, stirring the pot with unnecessary enthusiasm. "I saw them limping last night," she says. "Too much weight on the joints. Not too much walking. Not bad roads. Not a storm. Always wait. Always your fault. You leave before the conversation can worsen." As you walk, your knee throbs sharply. It's nothing serious, just overuse, fatigue, the kind of pain everyone feels in this era of constant labour. But when you pass a healer's cottage, the The door opens before you can slip by. The healer, an older man with hands that tremble slightly when he lifts them, squints at you. "You look strained," he says. "Your humours are worsening." They were always worsening, according to him. He ushers you inside. You protest, but he's already gathering tools and herbs. A bowl, a sharp knife, a pouch of dried, bitter-smelling plants. Your stomach tightens. "Sit," he orders. You sit. He examines your knee, prodding the flesh with cold fingers. "Swelling," he mutters. "Fluid. Too much flesh presses on the joints. Common for your type." Your type. He doesn't mean personality. He doesn't mean work habits. He means size, broadcasted as diagnosis. He recommends a poultice made from warm mashed onions, vinegar, and a substance you strongly suspect is animal fat. Then, while it cools, he prepares a purgative. "Better to cleanse the system," he says. "A heavy body holds illness longer." You want to tell him that everyone holds illness longer when they live in houses with drafts, when they walk through mud daily, when they have no concept of sanitation. But medieval medicine doesn't care for nuance, only theory. You swallow the mixture. It tastes worse than honesty. As the healer wraps your knee, he warns you not to overexert yourself, which is hilarious, considering life is nothing but exertion here. And then he says it. If you were smaller, the body would manage health more gracefully. Gracefully. As if health is a performance. As if pain is choreography. You leave feeling worse than before. As you limp through the village, the stairs multiply. People see the rap on your knee and assume the cause. A young man passing with a bundle of firewood smirks, "Weight will do that." A potter carrying clay adds, "Should have gone easier on the bread." A priest walking by murmurs, "The body reflects the choices of the soul." You want to scream. You want to shake them. You want to ask why thin people get injured too, why thin people fall sick, break bones, sprain ankles, cough through winters. But in this world, thinness is purity and fatness is blame, and logic is optional. By midday, another wave of judgment hits. Aging. You're not old, not by modern standards, but in this era, age creeps faster, bites harder, lingers longer. Medieval life weatherizes the body like an unprotected barn, and people assume, predict, and announce your decline before it arrives. An elderly woman selling herbs calls out to you, voice sharp, "Careful now. Flesh sags heavy with age. You'll feel it more than most." A shepherd sitting on a fence nods sagely, adding, "A big body grows old twice as fast." Neither statement is true, but neither statement is questioned. And the gendered commentary? Even worse. Women are told their bodies must stay thin to bear children safely. Men are told their bodies must stay agile to work honourably. Anyone who falls outside these narrow expectations becomes the subject of town analysis. "Oh, they won't survive childbirth," someone whispers as you walk by. "They won't live long," another says. "They'll be bedridden by 40, a third predicts confidently, as if reading your future off a tavern sign. Your knee throbs again. Not because you're weak, but because this is a world without medicine that works, without rest, without chairs that support, without boots that cushion. And yet your pain becomes prophecy in the mouths of others. The worst part, illness itself, any illness, becomes moralized. A cough, gluttony weakening the lungs, a fever, dampness trapped by flesh, a swollen ankle, excess weight, a poor night's sleep, overindulgence. You once caught a stomach sickness that swept through the village. Everyone was bedridden for a week. But when you vomited violently for 2 days, someone quietly suggested it was the body rebelling against sin. Your friend, one of the few who sees you without bias, rolled her eyes at that. "If sin causes vomiting," she whispered to you gently, "the whole village would be empty by morning." You'd laughed weakly then, grateful. But laughter doesn't erase the sting. As afternoon light fades, a new worry brews in your mind. What if you do get seriously ill someday? What if your knee worsens? What if your back gives out? What if age catches you faster than expected? In this society, illness isolates. Illness invites blame, An illness, when paired with sighs, becomes a spectacle of "I told you so." You imagine needing help, and you imagine the comments. "You should have taken better care. You brought this upon yourself. You never should have eaten so much. You should have trained your body early. You should have listened to warnings." Every medieval instruction feels retroactively cruel, yet even as you picture these scenarios, another truth emerges, quiet but solid. You have taken care. You have worked harder than most. You have climbed, carried, walked, endured. Your body is not weak. It's simply overworked, under-supported, and relentlessly judged. No one survives medieval life without scars. Thin people break too. Thin people fall ill. Thin people age and ache and limp and cough. The difference is that they receive sympathy. You receive scrutiny. Still, as evening settles in, you pull your cloak around your shoulders, straighten your back and walk. Slowly, yes, but steadily toward home. Your knee aches, but it moves. Your breath wavers, but it stabilizes. Your heart hurts, but it beats strong. Because despite every accusation, every whispered prediction, every medieval theory linking flesh to fault, your body persists. It lives. It adapts. It carries you through a world that refuses to carry you in return. And as the final stars prick the sky, one truth glows clear beneath all the noise. Your illness is not moral. Your pain is not punishment. Your body is not shame. It is simply human, resilient, flawed, alive, moving forward through a world that never learned how to see it correctly. And tomorrow it will carry you again.